In this video, I want to talk about technical interviews. If you're a developer or studying to become one, this is a phrase that you're going to be very, very well acquainted with. Whether you love them or hate them, let's be honest, we all hate them. For a large part of the interview pipeline, it's very different from what you do in the job. And so you have to actually prepare for the interview itself, which is pretty different from preparing for an actual software engineering job. Luckily, a lot of these places follow more or less the same pipeline. So if you prepare for what to expect from just a general view of the pipeline, you'll have a very good idea on what to expect from most, if not all, of these companies. And that's what this video is for. We're going to be talking about the whole pipeline from initial contact to final contract. We're going to be talking about what you can expect in each step and how to best prepare for it and what to look out for during each of these. Hopefully this video can help you out, if you have a bunch of interviews lined up and you've never done them, or you're planning on applying to a bunch of places. Now, before we go through this, let me know in the comments below, what do you think about the software engineering pipeline? If you've done any interviews, what do you think about it? Or from what you've heard, what do you think so far about it? So initially you'll get reached out by some kind of recruiter. This is often an email or maybe a LinkedIn message, where basically it's any other title other than your application with X or thank you for applying to Y. Where honestly, at that point, that's just a rejection. So the recruiter's gonna wanna schedule a phone meeting or a Zoom call with you. And you can think of that as a very high level vibe check. It's just to get you informed on the position itself and just to, get a high level overview of making sure what you put in the resume is right. Do they feel you're a good fit for this position if that's what you're looking for, things like that. You can expect some questions that you're going to want to know how to answer are why do you want to work here? Why are you looking to leave your last job? What do you look to gain from, a new position? They'll also ask you a little bit about your resume, past projects, any personal projects, what were you doing at your last job if you had one, and be prepared to answer and give some extra details about it. I usually like to preface it with a high level overview and just see how far they want me to answer, if they want me to go more technical. Just because, like I said, they're a recruiter, they're not really on the engineering team. So sometimes they may not be looking for a super, super in-depth answer, just some check to make sure that you know a little bit about what you wrote on your resume. And it's also important for you to ask questions, not for anything specific, but more just to get an idea of the position and how the job is going to be. You want to know things like the tech stack, how many team members are there, what is the kind of project you guys are going to be working on, general things like that are pretty useful. Getting some idea of the culture there is also pretty good, just because I know, depending on the position you're in, any job is useful sometimes, but you want to be careful of places that do hire to fire, where basically they're hiring you to fill up a slot that will probably get pipped or fired relatively shortly. And you also do want to get a good idea of the compensation range. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll ask you first, what are your thoughts on the compensation, before giving the actual details on, the specific positions they're hiring. So just double check, with the company's website, for the job positions, what is the usual company ranges? And, if you're okay with that, just give something in that range. And that's usually pretty good. So at this point, the main thing is, like I said, it's a vibe check. You want to make sure that the recruiter likes you and that you know what's on the resume, that you're able to flex it a little bit. So not much else here to say, just brush up on your resume, have some good soft skills, and you should be good here. And usually after that, you'll be given some kind of online assessment. So the online assessment is usually a Leetcode question. You'll probably get a hacker rank or a code signal for it. And you can expect, depending on the place, 1 to 3 questions. Sometimes, easy to medium. Sometimes they'll even give you 3 hards in the rarest of cases. This is usually just with you being timed on the website, no real proctor. What sucks about this is that usually they're very different from what you do on the actual job. Everybody can agree as a software engineer that what you do on the job is very different from your data structures and algorithms, which is what you'll need to study to prepare for these positions. For this interview, especially because it's pass-fail, just because, it's an online test, you'll just need to know, your code questions, go through the most common ones, and just study it like crazy, that you know it like the back of your hand. And also expect to work this under pressure. You get 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the question. This one, honestly, is just a case of prepare and hope that the question is, either an easy one or just one that you've seen before, because there's a lot of randomness with this. It's one of the reasons why Leetcode sucks. Luckily, at least from what I've seen, a lot of places are not doing this step as much now, just because, of how many AI tools are there that people are using for this step in the interview process. So they a lot of times just skip to the next step. The next step is some kind of interview with an actual proctor this time. It could be some interviewer at the company, or there's very rarely some third-party services like Carrot that people use where you get a proctor that's outside of the company. And here you can be given a bunch of different types of questions to work on. So it's important to know of the kinds that you can get, but be prepared for any of them. And at this step, usually it's just one because you're still in the middle of the pipeline. So they want to balance like speed of getting you through the final step of the pipeline with thoroughness. And before we talk about the specific kinds of interviews you get, it's important to know that a lot of times they don't mention this, but the interviewers you get could end up being somebody that's on your team. Like when you're interviewing, you may be interviewing for the team, by the team. So it's just useful to think about it always as if that's the case. And to, because of that, focus on, your soft skills, like to really emphasize having a conversation as you're going through the process. Like always talk through what you're thinking, and then always just see if you can like ask them questions on the thing as if you're discussing it and just including it, compared to just going through an interview and needing to go through the question. Well, there are some places that are sadly like that, and you're going to be talking to a brick wall and not really given any like input, any back and forth. A lot of good places actually do have that kind of back and forth conversation. And that's usually one way also you can tell about the company, is just seeing how they do through this interview process and see like, get a vibe of the interviewers, the employees there. So in general, you just want to give off good vibes, talk pretty well through like whatever kind of thing you're given. But as for the actual types of interviews you're going to get, you can think of three kinds. There's the technicals, the system design, and the live coding. So the technical ones are, again, like the online assessments. They're just Leetcode. There's no real way to like prep for it other than the same thing I just mentioned for the online assessment. Like go through the most common Leetcode questions. No real other way other than just rinse and repeat, learn to memorize them, and hope you get one that you've seen before. One important thing also here is, since you're also being interviewed by a person this time, they'll probably ask you about, runtime and memory constraints. So just remember that when you're studying it, to also look at, big O notation and, how much memory this solution takes. The other kind of interview you can expect is system design. So system design, I can make a whole other video on this, but you're basically given a super high level prompt like design a Twitter clone, and you have the 45 minutes to work on whiteboarding out the high level back end of what you would do to make it. This one is much more like theoretical, much more design based on, are you able to understand the important parts of building a system, like database tables, authentication, what kind of routes are you going to make, what kind of considerations you have to do for things like reliability, consistency, scalability. There's a lot of books and videos online that go through a lot of the useful topics for this interview, like rate limits, authentication, database tables, the kind of considerations you'd want to make for these questions, as well as just giving you a bunch of example questions that more often than not are usually the ones they use. So there's a lot of practice you can do with this. And luckily, I would say system design is something that's more common to what you do on the job, because a lot of what you do is actually designing large scale systems. And that brings me to the third kind of interview, where this one is the live coding one. Usually in this case, you're given like a high level prompt and some boilerplate, like here's a REST API, design these routes. And you'll work with the interviewer to, implement these routes. And sometimes you'll need to test it, sometimes you won't. But a lot of times they'll just look for general high level things you're accounting for. Like, are you handling authentication? Are you thinking about it? Are you needing to parse cookies? Are you worried about rate limiting, load balance? Again, it's a more granular version of the same things they're looking for that you would find with like a system design interview. It's a bit easier and harder to prep for at the same time, because most common to what you may need to do for the job, like designing a page or some kind of REST API. But because of how open in scope the kind of question you could get is, it's very hard to prep exactly for it. So this is just a case of like go through the general topics for that position. And then after that, assuming everything went well, you can expect the final round usually to be a super day. So what a super day is you can expect multiple rounds back to back to back. Like there's places that do 3 to 5 rounds for the final round itself. So you would need to do in some cases like 5 back-to-back interviews. The most I've done, I think, is 4 rounds, and this was all again the same day. And usually it's broken down in the same way. You have your technicals, your system design, maybe your live coding. So for those 3, I would say just it's the same prep, the same things you have to think about as the last round. It's just now you also have to account for doing it back to back to back. So maybe practice, do some mock interviews, and just have them scheduled one after another to get used to, that endurance that you'll need for the final round. The other kind of interview though you can get, and usually it's just here at the final round, is a behavioral. So a behavioral is another vibe check. You're basically going through similar questions that you went through with the recruiter. Sometimes it may be by someone that's more technical, so they may want you to go more in depth on the details of things like personal projects or last work projects that you worked on. And there's also the soft skill questions. You're going to need to know things like, have you ever had a disagreement with a team member before? Have you ever worked with a difficult team member? What are some examples you can give us of working on cross-team collaboration? Or have you ever led a project? Things like that. There's a bunch of questions you can go through, and a lot of times it's easy if you think about it as just being able to pull examples from your personal experience. Or in cases of where you may not have an answer to it, maybe you're able to shift it using your experience into something similar that you can relate to it. This is also hard soft skills. You need to also make them like you. Like I've seen and heard of cases where the interviewer does well on the technical rounds, they kill it. And then on the behavioral rounds, they don't really do that well. And because of that round gives them a hard no hire and they fail the interview. So for this one, just, look up the prompts, practice your speaking, maybe do it with somebody, go through methods like, there's like STAR. It's like the most popular one people use to talk about things for the behavior rounds, and just get used to being able to pull your personal experience using that method and explain the more soft skills like communication. And again, like I said, this is all back to back. Usually from my experience, it's been 1 to 2 technicals, Leetcode or live coding, 1 system design, and then 1 to 2 behaviorals. Yeah, this round sucks because you're going through so much and it's like the make or break, it's like the final round for it. And all these rounds are going back to back. So it's basically just a very long day for you. But at this point, this is like final thing of you get told whether or not you got the position and you get the final offer if you got it. And this is the period where, if you got the offer, you can do a little bit of negotiating. It depends on how much they're giving you, the location you're in, the level you're in, competing job offers, all those things that you can research or use. They're super useful to try and negotiate maybe for a better salary. At the end of that, you made it through to the end of a software engineering technical interview pipeline. I hope this video was pretty good at giving you some insights on what a technical interview pipeline looks like. And hopefully it helps you prepare for one if you have one lined up. And if you like what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe. But until then, peace.